It's a busy session, so we'll keep time and start early, or start on time, which is basically now. Again, welcome everyone. This session, maybe next slide, has the same house rules that you know probably by now. Please put your organization name or also in your name, the description of who you are, so we know where you work. And also, if you want to ask questions, please do, but put them in the chat, and there is live interpretation available in English, French, and Spanish. Right, so the purpose here, we did the first VCE in, I think it was April. We saw showcasing data. We saw 3 different approaches. We saw the EU8 Explorer, Project Browser in Canada, and the Map Africa from the African Development Bank. We thought we'd dive a bit deeper this time and look at Power BI as a visualization tool for IATI data. There's 3 different dashboards I think we will see, and we will also have a look at how you actually do this. I love especially these 3 because it goes from beginner to a very extensive dashboard, so it's something for everyone. We'll have less than an hour actually, so we should probably start. First one will be Nancy Duckels from Sightsavers. I hope she won't mind that we will call her a relative newcomer, and she'll show us the dashboard that she's created. Then number 2 is Elena Skovorodnikova, who works for Plan International in the Netherlands. She's going to show us a dashboard and also show some tips on how to use Power BI for XML. And then case number 3 is the Dutch Relief Alliance, a huge dashboard built by Data for Development, and Rolf Kleef from Data for Development will take us through how that came about. And we'll have a short question and answer session. Okay, who's in the room? We want a poll, of course, because otherwise it's not a session if there's no poll. First of all, what constituency do you primarily represent? You pick one. Is that you are a civil society organization, NGO or similar, a partner country? Are you the 3rd, private sector, the 4th, provider of development cooperation, or 5th, none of the above? And then you can scroll down for the second one. The second poll says, have you used Power BI before? Option 1 is yes, I am a Power BI expert. 2 is yes, but I'm a newbie. 3 says no, but I'm interested in using Power BI. And 4 is Power BI, what is that? I'm in the wrong session, perhaps. We'll wait for the answers. I think we have the results on screen. Mostly civil society organization and provider of development cooperation. So I think that's good, because I think especially relatively small organizations could really benefit from this session. And there are newbies and people who have not used Power BI before but are interested. Also very excited about that. I think we have a group of people that we can really, that really could learn something here. Okay. First presentation is Sightsavers. Nancy Duckels will spend 10 minutes, including the questions, on the challenges and the incentives from a relative newcomer perspective. So, Nancy, go ahead.
Cool, thank you. Can we move to the next slide, I think? So my name's Nancy Duckels. I work for Sightsavers based in the UK. It's really good to be here. And I don't mind at all being called a relative beginner because that's exactly what I feel like in Power BI. We are early in our data visualization journey. We've just started to explore it. So I'm hoping that bringing that perspective can be of some use to some people here today. But anyway, why have we started looking at using Power BI? So we know at Sightsavers, the IATI dataset, it's a rich repository of information, and it's actually unique within Sightsavers. And so what that means is when we're putting together our dataset, we're extracting different information from different places and combining it all together to publish IATI data. So it's actually quite unique and useful for us at Sightsavers to have all of those details gathered in one place. And we also wanted to begin exploring data visualization to bring the IATI data out to the rest of Sightsavers. You know, so the transparency team at Sightsavers, we manage the IATI process. We also have input from key stakeholders about certain elements within the data. So there is some awareness, but we want to bring it out to the total organization to make everybody aware of it. Part of that is we'd like to also check and improve the data quality. So as I said, the transparency team, we look after the Sightsavers IATI data, but we're not the experts in what the actual information is. You know, we don't know the details of some of those big programs, what the numbers should be, you know, so we're hoping that by, you know, using Power BI, we can get, you know, some of those stakeholders to look at it, check the data quality and find potential improvements. We're also interested in being able to tell stories about the work that we do, engaging new audiences, also demonstrating transparency efforts to donors is something that we want to explore as well. You know, it's about, look, we know that we publish this amazing data. We publish a really large data set as well. We publish IATI data about all programmatic activity undertaken by Sightsavers. So we kind of want to show it off a bit. We want to tell some stories and we want to shout about it. So that's really what led us down the road of data visualization via Power BI. Next slide, please. So all that's very well and good, but there have been some challenges along the way, as is to be expected. So what have some of those challenges been? So firstly, getting up to speed with Power BI itself, which sounds pretty obvious, but it's also pretty inescapable. You know, so we've had to sort of undertake some Power BI training that continues on. And we've also had to, well, you also need to understand the IATI data set itself, which we already do because that's what we work with every day. But you need to make sure that that Power BI and that technical IATI knowledge, you know, is your base, you know, or you need to go about acquiring it. Another challenge has been modeling the data. So I don't want to get too bogged down into some of the technicalities here, but you know, how the data interacts with each other, some of the one-to-many, one-to-one ratios, you know, so you know that your data model behind all the fancy visualization stuff, it makes sense, it all links to each other correctly. And part of that goes back to the Power BI training. I expect really understanding what your framework is and how it should all fit together. And in order to do that, you need to understand the data set itself. Another challenge is those stakeholders understanding what they are looking at. You know, so we'll put together a dashboard, take it out to some guys in, you know, let's say the comms team or the fundraising team. But some of the work around that is explaining to them what IATI data is, so they understand what it is they're looking at, so they can fully understand the context of what it is that they're being shown. But that's all good because that's part of the exercise as far as we're concerned with some of this stuff is about increasing organizational awareness. Another challenge, sort of right from the beginning really, is where to start. You know, I'll say it again, you know, we have a big IATI data set. It encompasses all the work that we do as an organization. So there's a ton of information there, which is great. you know, so it can be a nice problem to have of going, where do we start? What story do we want to tell? And then another challenge, which we haven't actually faced yet, because, you know, we're the relative beginner here, but compatibility of partner data. Now, this is going to be on the horizon. I fully expect to embrace this particular challenge, you know, but we want to get to a place where, you know, we are incorporating partner data within our dashboards. And I would imagine that we may face challenges around the quality of partner data, you know, making sure that, you know, details are in there that we want to compare, you know, and feed into our own data set. That's going to be on the horizon. So I look forward to exploring that particular challenge when we get to that point. So Sander, am I okay to share my screen? I think I am. So now let me just get up our dashboard. Just going to go. Okay. Let's get this full screen. Okay, so here is, I'm assuming you can all see my screen. If nobody shouts and says we can't, I'll just carry on. So this is a dashboard that myself, or really my colleague Lucas, who works with me at Sightsavers, has put together. And the aim of the game here was to put together a dashboard that shows, gives you sort of an overview of our 3 big FCDO funded programs, okay? The reason we decided to prioritize those is because these really are our flagship programs. They're the big grants, the big contracts, and it made sense for us to focus on these. This is built looking at our Excel file. So we have an Excel template that we created ourselves that we populate with all of our IATI data. And it is that Excel file that we run through Cove to create our XML. But that's what this is built on. Because we're only looking at Sightsavers IATI data, so we're able to base it off of that Excel file, just full disclosure for everybody. As I said, this is looking at 3 big FCDO funded programs, and it's designed with our grant managers in mind. So it's designed to give the grant manager of each of those programs an overview of the IATI data that we're publishing for that program. Now, the transactional data is important here, so they can see at a glance the numbers of what we're showing in terms of funding, committed funding, budget, and spend, as you can see. Also, disbursements to partners, and then underneath it gives you that project by project breakdown. So each of the individual projects that then make up those programs. FYI, we publish a separate IATI activity per project. That's what it refers to. So if I just start clicking around, love a click around, the top left, select program. So it's a send, did, and inclusion works. So I can change to see each of the programs. And as I said, really with the grant manager audience in mind, what they're going to be looking at is, you know, that overview of financial information here, you know. And as I mentioned earlier, myself and Lucas, we don't really know what those numbers should be. You know, we don't work on those programs. We don't know what the millions of funding ought to be, but the grant managers will. So they'll be able to look at a glance and go, am I happy for that to be published on IATI or am I not? Is that right? Is it wrong? Etc. But because we're IATI experts and they aren't, there is, if I go to the I next to the overview of financial information, there's this handy financial definitions that comes up, because they're not experts in IATI, so we wanted to kind of give them a bit of explanation about what those transaction descriptions actually mean. You know, what do we mean when we say incoming funds, incoming commitment, etc. Just get that down. So yeah, so I can use these filters to choose a particular program. I can choose closed projects or open projects. I can choose which year I want to look at, you know, so I can just go to 2021 of a send. I can choose specific projects within that, and this all links back to each other. The entire dashboard, it all links back. I've got disbursement to partners in the right-hand side. So again, for the grant managers, they will know, you know, who their big partners are and how much money, you know, they are due to receive over a certain time period or for a particular year. So that's another sort of quick at a glance check that they're going to be able to do. And then in the bottom, the sort of bottom second half of the screen here is where you see, as I said, that project by project breakdown. And you also see the individual project by project finances along the row there too. We also have the D portal URL for each project. So if the grant manager wishes to go and check, you know, or see it reflected on D portal, they're able to do that. And then I think the final thing I wanted to show off to you about this is the top right-hand corner. Lucas added in a nice little touch, which is this Power by IATI data button up here. And when you click that, it takes you to the IATI standard. So the grant manager or whoever else, you know, maybe looking at this dashboard can go and see exactly the code list, you know, and some of the backbone to what, you know, what is behind the data set that they're looking at.
I have to stop you, Nancy, unless there was one closing thing.
No, that was literally the very end. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Perfect timing. There's a lot of questions. I asked for them, so it's my own fault, but we can't cover them all. One of them is, what has been the response? Have you had any feedback from people in your organization?
So we have had some feedback from people in the organisation. We're still taking this out and refining it a little bit, but the feedback that we've had so far has been really positive, really positive. Right. Yeah. You know, people have been like, we didn't know about this thing called IATI data. This is amazing. It looks so useful.
It comes to life, doesn't it?
Yeah. This. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. There is one from, I see that your colleague is already answering, which I'm grateful for, but there's Erik asking, what is not possible by using Power BI? Have you run into limitations?
Lucas, do you have a view on that?
Hi, hello. So yeah, I work with Nancy and I worked with her to put together this dashboard. And yeah, I'm a complete beginner. So this has been my first experience in data visualization. So yeah,
we have to be quick, but
yep.
if you can.
So yeah, so at the moment it's just technical knowledge of what to do really. But I've also had some challenges with trying to use location data to create maps.
Okay.
But yeah, that's been a challenge.
All right. Okay. I think we have to go to the next one. All right. Elena, I've already introduced you, data analyst for Plan International in the Netherlands, so go ahead.
Well, I'm going to put a little stopwatch so we don't run out of time. So I'm here representing Plan International Netherlands. We are part of the global Plan International organization, but here at the Dutch office, we have a limited amount of projects, a couple hundred of them, and then we work together with our partner organizations or our country offices all around the world. So we're publishing one side of IATI data with the intention that our country offices would then follow up with the money that they spend directly. So it goes from our expenditures to our disbursements to their expenditures. So we started with IATI due to donor compliance requirements in late 2017. For any funding we get from official institutions such as Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we must report in IATI. But since then, we've also introduced Alliance dashboards where we are able to combine the files from Plan International, but also from other NGOs in the Netherlands and see the whole Alliance spending and results at a glance. And we also decided to go public and live to that transparency value and showcase all of the IATI data on our website for all of the visitors, not only for very technical grant specialists and so forth, but also for perhaps child sponsors that we have, or journalists, or really anybody who visits our website. And why did we choose Power BI? Well, it is one of the biggest visualization tools in the market, and it has virtually monthly updates. So any bugs will be fixed very quickly, and if any issues come up or any new suggestions, they really do implement them and often. There are training courses available. You can follow YouTube lessons for free. You can have so much available free material, but you can also find paid courses which will give you a really good basis. And if you have any question about Power BI, really, if you're stuck, you can just Google it. And there is a massive online community where a lot of these issues will be explained. So you can find an answer to 95% of your questions, which is a lifesaver. And of course, it also integrates with all the other Microsoft products and licenses. Since we already been on Microsoft, for us, it's just one little license to add, and it was relatively cheap because of that. And reports can be made public quite easily. All you have to do is just click publish to web, and there is a link, and you can embed it. So it's you don't need to hire any external developers to do that. And visualizing IATI data, as Nancy said, is just so much easier, and it's really showcasing the data in a easier format, and it's transparent, and you don't need to be a high level IATI specialist. You don't need to read the XML file. You just have to see a dashboard, which is a lot more friendly. On the next slide, you can see the example on our website. You would get this all on one page. That was the idea. You have a couple of filters on 8 types and themes, and you can choose that. And then it shows you, for example, like how many current projects here you see. So if you see filter on project status current, we have 82 out of 212 published projects. And then on the next slide, you can see if you just hover your mouse over one of the country bubbles, you will see how many projects in the country we have and what's the total budget. And similarly, on the next slide, if you hover above the title, you will see all of the information of that specific project. So here the choice was made to only publish will only showcase, only visualize a little slice of IATI data, which is the status, the dates, and the budget, and the themes, donors, and short little summary. So if you wanted to see more, you would have to really go to D portal. But for now, we just do a little part of it. And on the next slide, I can show you like what's actually, what does it take to do it this way? Well, we already have a team, CRM ICT team, who are making sure that our database is IATI compliant. So it generates an XML file automatically for us. Project managers then input all the data on projects and results, and then financial controllers and administrators update the financials. And then we have the planning, monitoring, evaluation, learning officers, or PME. And they're the ones who are responsible for the data quality and all the checks, and then generating the file to put it in the IATI registry. And then the last step in the process would be me, or anybody else in your organization with a compatible role who would already have ideally some experience with Power BI or any other analysis or visualization. Anybody who has already a background in data modeling, which would make the process a lot easier. Next slide, please. And for those who are not familiar with Power BI possibilities at all, this is what you need in practice. For external viewers, you don't need anything besides a link. That's the beauty of it. For anybody who needs to download Excel summaries from visuals, like from a table, yeah, it would be an internal user and you would need to have a license. Most NGOs go for the Pro license since you have discounts for them from Microsoft. And for the developers, some personal tips, not only do you need to have a PC with the Power BI desktop software, it helps to have a fast laptop, it helps to have good connection, it helps to have an external monitor to switch all the time. And it also definitely helps to have a little free software to check your code so that you can just, search for certain elements of the code in an easier way, which is color coded. That's just personal tips. And on the next slide, you will see a little bit, tips and tricks. If you're familiar with Excel or databases, you're probably thinking in rows and columns. There is a row for everything, and then there is a column for all of the other dimensions. Easy. Well, XML doesn't work this way. So for somebody who hasn't had any experience, it might be a bit daunting, but you need to learn how to unpack the file. So in the next slide, you will see a screenshot of the backend of Power BI. And this is based on Power Query. If you've ever combined several Excel sheets, and I don't mean copy paste like we all do, but I mean the Power Query in the backend where you can combine several files in one or get your data from a different different Excel or database, anywhere else. It's Power Query. So you will see here, arrow number 1, you just see new source. Arrow number 2, you just select XML, and then via web content. All you have to do is plug in your public link, which is then transported into error number 3. All you get is 3 columns, 1 row. Yeah, this is not the rows and columns you might have expected. So what you have to do is basically click on that little expansion, and then the first row, which is the IATI activity, it will expand further. And on the next slide, you see if you do this step, it will then expand it into many, many, many different dimensions. So you will have reporting organization column, title, description, sector, theme, all of these different attributes, all in each column. So each row is a little IATI identifier or project ID, and for every column is a certain attribute of that project. Well, if you were to now expand every single column in one view, you would end up with this massive, massive, massive file, and you have a lot of duplicates, since, well, each project can have multiple organizations behind it, multiple donors, multiple sectors, multiple themes. You get the picture. You're going to have dozens of duplicate values for each project. To avoid that, we actually create a table for each of them. And then you get a more traditional database field model where you have a project in the middle, and then one-to-many sectors, one-to-many themes, one-to-many partner organizations, and so forth, like a little nice snowflake or star, which you would be used to. So an example, the arrow with the little star. So here you have description. Well, we just duplicate this, this table, and then we call it summary. And then we just create for each of the projects, we only select the one that has a summary, not any other description, just one little piece that goes on our website. On the next slide, you will see that another example with a sector. So you would duplicate that base table that I just showed, and then you would expand only the IATI activity sector. You can remove all the other columns and just keep the sector. And in the next slide, you would know how to convert a little code, which is what you get in XML, to a more normal human language. So you see the orange little tables, arrows. Well, I group my tables by main tables, the ones that come from IATI file, and then I group them by supporting tables. Those would be the options and values. So you see a little link. It comes from iatistandard.org, and then you see code lists, and then the code list is for sector. So you can see in the columns highlighted, you just get a sector code 11110. Do you know what that is? I don't. That's why I use option sets, which would immediately convert it to education policy and the Ministry of Management. And you have immediately a little description. You have a category name. So you're able to also organize your data in a lot more user-friendly way. And on the next slide, you will see a different example. This is for using partner data together with your own. So you loaded your own data, you organized everything, and now you have alliance partners. And since they're reported in IATI, it's all in the same structure. That's the beauty of it. The only thing you need to do is on the left-hand side where you have the 1 in the arrow. So each of the partners will have their own unique public link, and then you load them in the same way. The only thing you need to make sure is that you have the exact same set of columns. So if you only chose to report results and finance and maybe a title, those are the only 3 columns you keep, right? So you have the project name, title, details on finance and results, and that's all you keep. So you remove everything else. And then once you make sure that every partner has the exact number of columns, you click on append queries and you put them all together. So you say each of these NGOs will be added to one file, and it's going to live in the base table. And so the orange little arrows, they're showing that in this one base table, we now have AMREF and Rutgers and Royal Tropical Institute and Choice and everybody in just one file. And then this column, which is the reporting organization narrative, that will be a filter. And by using that filter, you'll be able to easily tell whose budget and whose projects those are. And that's how the Alliance dashboards are made. On the next slide, I will talk about the other challenge, which is how do you make sure that the data you publish is actually correct. It is very difficult to control for hundreds of projects, and everybody has slightly different interpretation of what results should be like, what's aggregated, what shouldn't be aggregated, is it per year, is it for the entire duration of the project? The possibilities here are endless. So on the next slide, I'm showing you our two-step process. First, we control the data that's in our CRM system. So before it's in IATI, it's just in our system, and we're able to see at a glance in multiple views which person, so which project manager inputted which data and which not. And then at a glance, you see what has been filled in, and if anything is missing, you'll open the matrix and see exactly which project is missing what information, maybe one project is missing budget and so forth. So you control it all in CRM. After that, you would generate an XML file. And what happened in the past is sometimes somebody would not use a checkbox to publish in XML. They would forget to do something, and then we would publish and see all the errors afterwards. So to prevent that, we also check the XML file. So step 1, CRM data before it's added to IATI. And step 2, in the next slide, this is the XML file before it's published. So somebody would just have to put the manual file, the XML file, in a folder in SharePoint, and then it will come in automatically in this Power BI dashboard. And then it would show, hey, there is a little highlight, in red, there is a mistake here, or pay attention, this may be a bit too long. It would control, in this case, all the budgets. So a financial controller would see what is the budget, what's the spending. Again, I can't tell what those numbers should be, but the financial controllers will be able to immediately see if there's a huge overspending which occurred by a simple mistake or duplicate import or something. So they're able to catch all of that. And once we see that this is all correct, this XML file is then uploaded to the IATI registry, and we're done. And this happens every quarter. On the next slide, I'll show, is there anything else that we faced that was challenging? Well, training dozens of colleagues. We don't only have the people in the Dutch office, the project managers, but we also have external parties and other NGOs with our alliance partners, or maybe in the country offices. And perhaps they've never used Power BI before, and you need to explain to them the basics of the front end. How do you expand a little visual, or maybe how do you use the filters, and what's the difference between a filter that filters the entire report, or maybe just this little visual with bars or a pie chart. So all those little things, you need to have somebody dedicated on staff who would teach users. And then the secondary is that you also have to make sure that your supplier, whoever is helping you with the XML generation, they remain IATI compliant. We are lucky that we just have a plugin in our system that generates it for us, but I know that other organizations use different methods. Other questions is which of the published data to show. We made a decision on our website to only show financials. We don't currently do results, but you may be able to visualize something else. In the future, we'll probably add a bit more results, but again, very specific, like one indicator, and only, for example, the people we reach in each country. Just pick one, stick to it, and make it very clear. But for public reports, do you also want to have a secondary mobile-friendly version of the report, or should everybody just open it with their laptops? Should it be embedded, like a little section or website if you scroll, or should it be its own little page? Should it be advertised, or should it be a bit under the radar, thinking that your users will find it themselves? Again, who is the target audience? Is it the very specialized MinBuza workers who are used to working with grants, or is it general audience on the website who's probably never experienced any budgeting before? They don't know how it works. They don't understand, what the proper burn rate should be at this time of the project. Who is your audience? And then you should adjust every dashboard to that. And at Plan, we have over 20, of which about 7 or 8 are dedicated to projects. And yeah, they each have very specific target audience in mind. And the last slide, what have we actually achieved by doing this way? Well, we did train over 60 colleagues, and we continue training with every newcomer. We are now able to get results within minutes because these dashboards are available for the managers. At any point, if somebody asks, how many projects do you have in this country? It no longer is a long email chain with everybody, giving input. Somebody just opens their phone, looks at the dashboard and says, yeah, 6 with this much budget, done. And it also allowed us to reduce the costs because everything now is automated. So I'm no longer involved in the IATI process almost at all, since everything is automated to the point where my help is no longer needed. So I'm able to focus on different tasks. And of course, we also publish higher quality data as more issues are found and fixed before it goes online. And of course, the improvement doesn't end. We're still building, better and faster and easier ways of checking the data. We're moving, we're training more specialists. Every person who comes on board has their own ideas of, how things should be checked and how they should be published. We're definitely working location data because it is a real struggle. So there are definitely things to improve. But by using Power BI, we're able to spend less time on manual checks and move towards, deeper discussions and improving the data and just taking it to the next level. And I'm happy to answer any questions which you may have.
Sorry, again, perfect timing because I almost stopped you there. There are some questions. One person, I think maybe you mentioned CRM, because it produces the XML for you. So it's integration. So Bo Madsen is asking, did you have the XML set up in the CRM before you started with Power BI, or did it stem from IATI compliance? I'm not sure if I understand your question, Bo. You could perhaps unmute and clarify, unless Elena knows what you mean.
I can just quickly say, it's just, I'm just wondering about the storage of the data originally, even before making the dashboards. So did you store them in XML files also before this? Is that something that goes back a long time, or is that a new thing?
No, so all our data, it lives in the CRM system. So the CRM, I hope I understand your question. So we have a CRM dynamics. So it's got all of the fundraising information, and it's got a different side of the database, which is projects. And then financial officers and project people, they would just input the data in there. So it looks just like any other CRM system. And then we have a supplier who created this little plugin for us. And by just clicking on the generate XML file, all of the data, which is clicked on checkbox, yes, do publish this part of data to IATI. It picks up all of the projects from the database and generates them into XML. So the only data we actually store in XML is the one that goes in the quarterly publications. Everything else lives in a normal database.
So, and you build your dashboards straight from the XML files. You don't create a environment to store data in databases, which a lot of organizations do. This is straight live from the files, right?
So the ones that I showed on our website, yeah, that comes from the XML file. All of the Alliance dashboards, they come from the XML files. Yeah. But the data quality checks that I showed, like the last two, the first one comes from the database, from the CRM before it's published, and then the second comes from the XML file, but while it's still in our hands before it's published.
Right, so, right. It's an offline XML file, the check before it goes online. Yeah. So the has the fact that you build it straight from the files led to any performance issues?
Performance issues with
the dashboard, because it takes it from online files, which some people are worried about.
It's a little bit, performance issues with the link, no, it's going to have no impact on the file in the registry. It's a little bit more difficult to work with as a developer. So I would, why I advise to have stronger Wi-Fi, stronger laptop is partially because it takes quite a while to load the data. And once it already lives in a Power BI online environment, once the report is built and it's published in the online environment, then it's just the same. It's going to load just as fast as any other report. But the building process is definitely longer.
Okay, that was my question. I squeezed one in. Inge van der Brug wants to know, with your method of duplicating tables, because you're loading it often then, do you ever face problems with refreshing or updating? It might actually be the same question, I'm not sure.
It depends on how you duplicate. So if you use the base table as the main, so the base table source is the XML file itself, but then you basically cite that base table and everything else, that's a bit easier. Yeah, so but if you load every single duplicate indeed comes from the XML, then you load the XML file like 12 times. That's going to take forever. But if you're citing maybe it's not called duplication then, but if you're citing the base table and then that's what you then remove, only keeping like sector here and the organizations here, donors here, and yeah. So long as you then use XML file once, then that's not too bad. In practice, we load one XML file from like ourselves and then whatever partners we have, and also from the IATI registry for code lists. So in the end, you would probably load about 5 or 6 XML files in total, which, yeah, it takes a bit of time.
We ran out of questions and also out of time. So again, perfect timing. We should quickly move on to Rolf, who is, I think, you could perhaps call one of the founding fathers of IATI, showing us the Dutch Relief Alliance dashboard. Go ahead, Rolf.
Yeah, founding fathers is a bit too much of a credit. I've been working with IATI for about 10 years, and it was introduced to me.
That in itself. Anyway.
Yeah, so basically the privilege of being the last is that I can just basically say, like, but lots of the experiences that Nancy and Elena mentioned are experiences that we ran also into, so I don't need to go over all of those again. What I want to do is basically look at our starting point, which was starting from an alliance of organizations, the Dutch Relief Alliance. So if we look at the Dutch Relief Alliance, it's a group of 15 organizations, including the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who basically have a preset set of agreements so that in the case of a humanitarian crisis, it's very quick to set up a response with whoever of the organizations are active in that particular region or in that particular sector. And each time there is a crisis response from a group of these activities, it's called a joint response. And so all of these organizations are fairly big. They all have their own IT systems. They all have their own IT landscapes. But now when you start working together, you have this challenge of bringing this information together from different organizations for one particular response. So wouldn't it be great if there is a way to exchange that data in a standard way? So if we go to the next slide, basically, IATI is such a standard. It's exactly what IATI was intended for, to exchange forward-looking, timely information, to make coordination across actors more effective, more easy. The other benefit was it's already underway. The Dutch ministry is collecting IATI data from all these other member organizations, and basically all these organizations already have, in any form of maturity, a process underway of how they can publish IATI data. So how can we benefit from this? How can we move away from copy-pasting information into spreadsheets and then, as the most innovative way, share them on SharePoint rather than emailing them? But how can we directly tap into the information from that's already being published in IATI? So if we go to the next slide. First, I just want to quickly go into what is the anatomy of a joint response from the perspective of IATI. So if you look at it at the top of the screen, basically the Dutch Ministry or the DRI, Dutch Relief Alliance Foundation, is the main donor for one particular joint response. And there will be one organization in green here who has basically a lead activity that covers the complete budget for this joint response. And then underneath that are like the implementation activities of both the lead organization as well as the partner organizations. In this case, there are 2 partner organizations involved in the joint response. And then beneath that, in the flow of finance, there might be partner organizations further along the line. For instance, international partners like Plan Netherlands might be kind of working with the Plan office in a particular country, or Oxfam might be working with Oxfam GB to implement this. These are additional partner organizations that are involved in this whole joint response. But for the purpose of the joint response dashboard, we're just looking at these colored boxes of the main organizations within the Dutch Relief Alliance that are active in a joint response. And basically the challenge is, like, if you're a joint response manager, you're also responsible for making sure that all your partner organizations are publishing the right information to the Dutch ministry, making it available as IATI data. And so you have a challenge of, like, not only knowing what the status of your project is, but also whether the data that you're communicating about it is correct. And that was sort of the starting point for the dashboard that we created. So to go into that dashboard, if we go to the next slide, Sander. Basically, once you go to the Dutch Relief Alliance dashboard, and maybe you can also paste the link to the dashboard in the chat so that people can already play around with it if they like. It's a publicly available dashboard. So what you see here on the left-hand side is the list of organizations involved in the Dutch Relief Alliance. There's years that you can filter on. In the middle and the top, there's the joint response lead budget, which is about how much money is received by each organization for coordinating or for the complete joint responses. And then in the bottom, there are two tables for the implementation budgets organized by organization and by geography. And so this gives you a sort of a high-level complete overview of all joint responses. On the top is a drop-down bar where you can select one joint response. So if you go to the next slide, we selected the Yemen 5, the fifth joint response that is happening in Yemen, which kind of makes it a bit less overwhelming. So you can see at the top that CARE Netherlands is the lead organization and has a lead budget for it. And then below, you can see that there's like 5 organizations involved in implementing the activities in Yemen as part of this particular joint response. What we looked at was like 2 different things to try to kind of make this information available to the joint response managers and participants. So the first one that we looked at is, if you go to the next slide, is the financial overview. So here again, you will see like the structure that I referred to earlier. At the top is the joint response lead project as published in IATI, and at the bottom is the list of implementation activities with the financial details as published in IATI about incoming commitments, budgets, remaining budgets, etc. What we also really wanted to look at with the joint response is the results data, because it's not just about how much money is going into that, but there's also really a lot of effort going into how do we respond, how do we report or publish about like what are the impacts and the results. And so if we go to the next slide, there's a next page in the report which looks at all these results. The Dutch Relief Alliance together basically made agreements on like what indicators we will share in the context of the Dutch Relief Alliance, in the context of the joint responses. These are based on the European Commission's ECHO indicators, or they should be the ECHO indicators. And there's also really a focus to try to provide sex and age disaggregated data. So what we try to do is make all those indicators, all the data available in a dashboard, so you can see a little bit like, okay, what are we doing in Yemen? What are the targets and how far are we in terms of results? So this is, again, like all the indicators, all the results. If we go to the next slide, you can see like if we would click for the sub-theme of health and we break them down by organization, we get like a more detailed insight in like which organizations are publishing which information about their results. And at the bottom of the screen is basically a table of all the detailed records as they are published in the IATI, where you could also, in this case it's empty, but you could also see comments that organizations have made about the results for particular periods, etc. So that's a very quick, very rushed sort of presentation. I do encourage you to look around as well. If we go to the next slide, like what are the challenges that we faced when trying to do this? Well, it's a lot, as mentioned with the other presenters as well, like it's a lot about data quality in the beginning. It's a lot about getting the indicators right, getting the results right, etc. Also, what we really found in working with the Dutch Relief Alliance and their partners is IATI really provides a base standard, but it's really like only a base standard. So you still need to standardize a lot more. For instance, how are you going to link to each other? What is the agreement that you're making about the structure that I presented, and make sure that everybody follows the same structure? What is the financial information that you're going to include? We can only show budgets, or specifically if we're going to show like remaining budget or something, we need to calculate it based on some information in the IATI. So everybody needs to publish at least the same fields for IATI in order to be able to make a consistent remaining budget calculation. And similar is like about the result indicators. So as I already mentioned, we used the European Commission ECHO indicators for that, but then you have like the indicator dimensions. Within the IATI, there is not a real way to standardize this particularly. So you really need to standardize this in terms of like making sure that everybody inputs the same text fields as dimension names, as dimension values. And then as a last challenge that I want to mention here is, as I mentioned, all these organizations have their own IT systems, and these might not be as adaptable as you wish. So it might not be possible for an organization to actually add the dimensional data in the way you would like, which provide challenges. So to go quickly over a few of those things, if we go to the next slide, the first challenge that we really run into the most in the beginning is like if organization 2 is not providing the right link to the lead organization, and vice versa, the lead organization is not pointing to the right activity of organization 2, we can't find them. The way we process the data is we collect the IATI publications of all publishers, and then we go down and find, based on the lead activities, we find all the underlying activities. So if the links are not there, we can't find you. So what we did in the end is add, if we go to the next slide, is add a table to the report itself, where we try to provide back feedback information to organizations. If we can find them, like how could they improve their data? Like what is missing? How would the data quality can be improved? And the other thing, and that's what I mentioned already as well, is like if you go to the result information and to the dimensions of indicators, so we go to the next slide, you will see that there's like a huge variation in how you can both write a dimension name and how you can write the value. And again, like for organizations, they might have their own internal standard already, which is not completely the same as the standard that you agree amongst each other. So what we do in the data processing is basically have a lookup table where we look up known values, like on the left-hand side, and present them as shown on the right-hand side, so that we can actually produce a dashboard where this section H disaggregation really works. So yeah, maybe to reiterate my last slide, what are the lessons? Again, it is about data quality. Again, IATI is just one component, so it's really about like what's the story you're trying to tell, and how is that represented in the IATI data. What we really, in collaboration with the Dutch Relief Alliance, focused on a lot as well is on the organizational processes around data organization. So how do you make sure that all these organizations, that you work with the IATI experts in each organization and get them on board of like how they need to adapt their internal systems and their exports so that this dashboard actually can work. And then as a last one, like how will you then use it to promote it as a sort of like, cold shower experience, like the first time you show the dashboard to financial people and they look at the numbers and they say like, well, these numbers are not right, so we can't use the dashboard. It's like, it's really hard work to convince them, like this is the information that you're actually communicating to the ministry. So maybe the ministry is looking at the same wrong numbers. So how to get them on board?
I hear the word ministry, and I'm I think we also have to. Are you close to the end of your presentation?
Yeah, it's okay. Let me do the last bullet.
Okay.
I would say like it's often treated as a sort of a project, like let's just take 2 months to build a dashboard. I would say it's almost more like a garden. You need to plant things, you need to grow them, you need to take care of them. You need to keep working on it as long as you want to use your dashboard and kind of, get the fruits from it, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Erik has one question. Why did you use Power BI? I think it also had something to do with your with the people you built it for.
There's basically what I didn't mention in this presentation is that we split our data processing in 2 parts. So we have a data processing in a sort of standard open source business or data warehousing tool, which creates a database which then can be presented in Power BI, which is easy to show in Power BI. But you could also present it in Tableau or in Google Data Studio or anything else. The reason we went with Power BI is basically because almost all the NGOs have Microsoft license agreements, and so they have cheap access to Power BI. They're already used to that in terms of their own internal systems. It's one less thing you need to master. Yeah.
It is a great tool as well, and you are up to speed fairly quickly, and it truly is doable to do this. I see a raised hand by Erik. Erik, do you want to unmute and ask or comment?
Yes, for sure. Thanks.
We have very little time, so I hope.
Just a small thing.
Yeah.
First of all, thanks a lot for the free presentation, most inspiring, etc. I have one question. We get now information about visualizations made by Microsoft Power BI. We get the link. My question is, how do we manage to get from the entire IATI community more examples of visualizations made by Power BI?
Yeah. Good question. Where do we find the others? I think you haven't you, didn't I see a post where you tried to collect as many examples as you could find somewhere on IATI Connect? Was that you?
Yeah, but that was concerning the visualization of all the IATI data. Now I'm especially interested, and I think also other people, on visualizations made specially by Microsoft Power BI.
Ah, specifically from Power BI, yeah. Well, Power BI has, of course, the website of all public dashboards that you could search, perhaps, but I'm not sure if that works well.
I'm looking for the visualization made by Microsoft Power BI on IATI, using IATI data.
Okay. Yeah. Does anyone have any?
I would only say, Erik, I think that your list is still the most complete list. So if you would tag the ones that are made with Power BI, that would probably be the best list at this point that I have as well, that I would refer other people to as well.
Okay, maybe
at the same time, yeah, at the same time, I feel like, yeah, there's more people who have sort of hidden projects that they can't share either, but that they know that exist. So maybe it does make sense at the to have IATI connected, so as a place to share more of these experiences, as Nancy was showing as well. Like work is on the way that we're not aware of.
There's also, I know that the Elena very quickly showed how to create dashboards of several XML files combined for alliances. I know that the alliance dashboards that you build are often not public.
Correct. So they're shared only internally with other alliance partners. So they're broadly used and shared within like a dozen different NGOs. But to make it public, that's not a thing.
No. So a lot of stuff is under the radar. So a complete list will be very, very hard to find.
Yeah, but I think it's also valuable to have sessions like what we have now, which are recorded, and we can share the knowledge and the tips and the tricks without necessarily making the links public.
Yeah.
Those who need to know this information will be able to get it, but the general public, not necessarily. Yeah.
Okay, I think we have to round off. I want to thank everyone. Especially our three speakers. It was, I think, very, very valuable to have you talking about how the challenges and how you got this done in the first place. We should end this because we have no 15 minutes between now and the next one. We go straight into the next one. So run to your coffee machines now and come back for the next. You see the links here, and they will also be posted. Thanks, everyone.